Well, hello, I'm David Freeman with Is That Really in the Bible? I want to ask you a question. Why was your Savior killed? Why was Jesus Christ killed? Now, you do know that Jesus was killed by religious people. He was killed by deeply religious people. In fact, he was killed by the religious establishment of his day. Now, the sinner, on the other hand, loved Jesus. They couldn't get enough of Jesus. But the religious people hated him. Now, I want to tell you why Jesus was killed. It's 4 words. He preached the gospel. That's why your Savior was killed. Now, you may be thinking, well, look, I preach the gospel every Sunday morning. No. What you're preaching is probably would not even be considered the gospel. It doesn't even come close to resembling the gospel. Now, let me illustrate here what I'm talking about. In Luke 2 and verse 52, it says this. It says, "And Jesus increased in stature and in favor with God and man until he began to preach the gospel." Once he began to preach the gospel, he lasted 3.5 years, and then he was crucified. Now, the reason I'm telling you you're probably not preaching the gospel is because what you are concerned about is favor with man. That's the reason I'm saying you're probably not preaching the gospel. It's because your greatest concern is favor with man. You see, when Jesus began his ministry, his gospel, the favor with man days were over with. And that's the reason he only lasted 3.5 years. Now, how do I know that most preachers are about favor with man? Well, the most obvious reason is what I would call occupational ministry. Your livelihood depends on your favor with man and whether they like you and whether you can please your congregation. That's what your livelihood, that's what your salary depends on. Occupational ministry has rendered the gospel totally neutered. I mean, it's become irrelevant. It's a waste of time and energy. I was driving down the road and I turned on the radio and I was listening to some preaching. And the preacher, I don't know how this even came up, but he said, "Do you want to hear me talk like Donald Duck?" And I don't know what that had to do with his message, but believe me, but he starts talking like Donald Duck. A preacher starts talking like Donald Duck. And I could tell, it was a huge congregation. You could tell by the audience, and they thoroughly enjoyed it. And I just cut my radio off and I said, you know, religion has ceased to be relevant. It's not relevant anymore. You know, something has happened, what I would call the feminization of the ministry. Now, you know, you do know that testosterone levels in men is dropping with every generation, and there's a lot of causes for that. Not enough sunshine, not enough vitamin D3, too much alcohol, too much beer. You know, there's all kinds of things that lowers a man's testosterone. But it's almost like what I see is the feminization of the ministry. It's just weak, whimsical, passive, fat, flabby men pleasers talking about Jesus. And, you know, it's occupational ministry. Look, I get paid to do this, and I'm going to do this in order to keep continuing a salary and having money come in.